Hey everyone, and welcome to Trustworthy Tuesdays with Susan and Christina.
Hi there, everybody. Really excited to be here. And I'm in Buenos Aires today.
I love that. I think one thing that's really special about Susan and I is that we're always somewhere in the world. We're never in the same place. We've only ever been in the same room once in our whole, I don't know how long, 4 to 6 year relationship.
In fact, it was really kind of funny. Cristina and I did a strategy weekend together, like a couple days. And I was staying at her house in Brooklyn, and because I was in New York for other meetings as well. And as we were planning this, I said, "Did you realize we have never met? And now I'm staying at your house." And 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 so I think that there's a whole thing, and I know we were talking about self-trust, and maybe we can move it into how do you build trust online? Because at the end of the day, we never realized we had not met because our relationship had developed in so many different ways over a course of a year. And we did it all online.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because actually, now that I think about it, you and I have such a strong relationship and we share so much personally as well, that it is wild to me that it all started and the trust actually developed into a very strong level of trust all online. And I actually have quite a number of virtual friends who I would love to meet them one day in person.
So what's really fun about that is I do as well. And I think we can then get to talking a little bit about workplace, because one of the obstacles to virtual work in the workplace is people say you can't build relationships, which I think you and I are a good example of how that is actually not true. And it just takes intention and effort and time. So I just think it's different than doing it face to face. And yes, there's a reason and a need for both, right? So I don't want to take one away from the other, but I am planning another trip to Australia. And there is a woman that I've known now for 2.5 years since COVID, who has her own business, Susan Young, and she lives in Melbourne. And we are literally planning 3 days together in Melbourne. And we can't believe we're finally meeting in person after we feel like we know each other so well online. So it can happen. And I've got these virtual friends too, and get so excited when I can meet them in person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things well, one of the learnings as well that I've learned over time with building an online relationship with yourself, but also with others, is presence. I
Wait,
struggle.
wait, wait. You mean, wait, I shouldn't be doing other things while I'm online with you right now? Like checking my emails and looking at my text messages, and you think I should pay attention?
It's tough. Like, I have to admit, look, it's tough. We live in a world where like we've got all of these like gadgets next to us. I've got my phone, I've got like two computers in front of me, I've got an iPad, I also have a Kindle. My Kindle doesn't have notifications, but there's just so much around, and there's so many little beeping things, right? My ice machine beeps, my dishwasher beeps, and it's hard to not be distracted these days. And so when you're building a relationship online, sometimes I have to admit, it was very hard for me to be fully present, not only because multitasking was almost, and still, very often it's considered like, oh, someone's really good at their job, or someone's just really, really great, or they could do it all because they can multitask. And it took a while for me to realize, like, actually, no, like that's BS. If you're multitasking here and there, okay, that's fine. And sometimes we've got no choice. But when you're trying to build a relationship, when you're trying to build trust, I think that's where that was a big lesson for me, is just be present and hear the person on the other side of the screen and be interested in what they've got to say, and check for understanding. Like certain things that, like it would be really strange to multitask in front of someone having a conversation live in person.
Although how many times, and we all consider it so rude, are you sitting in a meeting or talking to somebody and they go start checking their emails on their phones, and all of a sudden their heads are down on their phones, and you're like, wait a second, I'm talking to you. But you actually, when it happens live, you actually can call somebody out on it nicely, or or at least it's happening and you can navigate it. When it's happening virtually, you often don't know,
Yeah.
and people have figured out ways to make it hide it a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. And I have to thank you for calling me out.
Have I done that?
Times, which I appreciate. Hey, Mark.
That was Mark.
Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate when you've called me out. There are some times when I just don't have the mental capacity, and I will say, like, I'm struggling right now. If I don't multitask, I feel like I'm really going to drop a ball. And like, sometimes it's good to call it out, to call out the reality of what's going on in your brain. Like, you've got all these mental tabs and you can't close all those mental tabs quick enough to be present.
So
but I don't know. What do you think?
So when I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about trust and building and virtual relationships, I think that in order to build relationships, you have to, it's about alignment. It's about alignment of core values and interests, and in order to trust each other. So how do you, when you're in a world of being pinged in 5 million ways, as you started explaining all that, I started hyperventilating, going, oh yeah, like I get it. There's a lot going on all the time coming at us. And yet building these virtual relationships takes time and effort and space and intent. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, all those things pinging at us take away from what is necessary to build those relationships. And then on top of that, if I'm going to align with you in those areas, I have to understand who I am in those areas to really figure out how to bridge our relationship from two separate people and humans to people that actually are in relationship and trust each other. And in order to do that, we have to create space in these virtual meetings for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have caught myself in the past jump into meetings and getting straight down to business. Like, okay, guys, that meeting with the client was really great. Blah, 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 blah. What needs to get done? X, Y, Z.
Right. You just jump right into work, right? You just go, okay, let's just get it done. We have 30 minutes. Go.
Yeah. And like checking in with everyone to say, like, hey, everyone, what's everyone's gut telling you out of that meeting? And how's everyone feeling about that meeting? And like, that's a different way. You can then take it a step further and say, hey, everyone, how are you going today?
Well, yeah. So, and I'll call her out because she is a big hero of mine, Ann DePietro, who I worked with. She was at IBM at the time. And every time we had a phone conversation, she said, before we started, she checked, and you and I do this all the time. How are you? Mm-hmm. And then she stopped and gave me space to respond and actually listened. And I think if we, and you and I do that all the time, like we literally somewhere made a decision not to just jump right into business, as you were just saying, like just jumping in and checking in, because so many of us show up with stuff happening in our families and happening at work and happening on the drive coming in. And there's so many things that are impacting how we can possibly show up at that moment. And being able to talk about it a little bit, and it could be good things, it's not necessarily stressful, bad things. I just told you I'm in Buenos Aires and I sent you a picture of I was horseback riding the other day on a ranch. I mean, how cool is that? Like, how do we connect on a personal level and check in and care about what we're each coming to the table with and who we are as people before we jump in? It almost gives us the right to jump in honestly and in trust.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I think what is often misunderstood is that, yes, we can be in a time crunch, right? But the research has shown that people do work more effectively, more collaboratively, and more efficiently when they feel that I have a purpose and a place within this team, and I know what contribution I'm making, and I am cared for, and I care for my coworkers as much as they care for me, and we're going to kind of get through this together. So there's evidence of a return on trust. And I think that's really, really important, because as much as this sounds like soft and fluffy and squishy, it can actually really impact your bottom line.
And think about how more effective your teams are going to work. So imagine a world where, as your teams get together to work on a project, you take 5 minutes and just go around the room and say, how you doing right now? Like, where are you right now? How are you doing right now? Here's your moment to share. And then think about the bonds that form. So if you say, oh my gosh, I just, my son or my daughter just graduated preschool today or is graduating preschool at 3:00. And then I'm thinking, oh, my niece and nephew did that last year. I was there. I know it. Now we have a bond. Now we actually are aligning on something that's really important, that's outside of work. And that is, children in our lives that we really love and care about, that are going through a milestone event. And so now we have something in common outside of the project we're working on, which just allows us to build that relationship and build trust. So imagine that world where we start each team meeting with checking in, and then on the back end, checking out again to do what you just said. How did y'all take this? How did you react to it? How are you feeling about what went on? How are you feeling? Stop and the feelings are there, whether we want to acknowledge them or not, they exist. So what happens if you give them some voice?
Yeah. I have this mentor. He's an amazing man. His name is Andrew Buto. And he was my mentor when I first got into consulting, like years and years and years ago, at my first consultancy in Australia. And one of the things he used to say to me is, how do you know you have rapport? Like, how do you know that the rapport is there and your client trusts you? And over time, I've kind of played with that and experimented with that to figure out, like, what's the level of rapport? What's different with my relationship with the client? And one thing I go back to Andrew about, and he teaches about how to build rapport as well, which is amazing, which links directly to what we do with trust, is he said, you've got rapport when your clients start to tell you things about their personal life that actually matter to them. Whether their kid just won an award at school, or whether they've had to take their dog to the vet, or whether they're so excited because they've reached a new personal record at the gym. Like, that's when you've got rapport, and that's when you've developed enough trust for them to tell you about them.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really, really good way to measure, have you gotten there? I love that. I do have a funny story about that. I have, I guess people, I tend to build rapport pretty quickly with people. I know that's one of my strengths. And I was working with someone in a firm, and I was trying to train her on how do you build rapport and how do you build alignment, and et cetera. So she was an interior designer. She ended up having to travel with my client to a client site, and the drive was 2 hours. And apparently she took my building rapport training to heart and talked about herself. She didn't catch you have to find out about the other person and make it about the other person, not necessarily you, and then figure out where to bridge. She literally spent 2 hours talking about herself all the way to the client site. My client called me up and said, shut her down. Are you kidding me? She said she never stopped. She said, I know what time she goes to the bathroom, for goodness sakes. She said, she never stopped talking. And I'm having a feeling that you tried to teach her how to build rapport. Well, you missed it. It needed to be about me, the client, not about her. So part of that though is really an interesting learning, right? Is
Yeah.
that how do we ask open-ended questions? How do we show interest in the other person? How do we ask them about their day and then continue to go deeper on that? When somebody said, "I have a good day," instead of just letting it go at that, saying, "Well, what was good about it? Tell me a little bit more about what was good about your day."
Yeah.
Instead of saying, "So did I. Let me tell you what happened." And so I think it takes a little bit of training and thinking, and in terms of how do we open up space for other people to share and other people um, to really let us in on what's so important to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it reminds me as well. I speak at least once a year at Pratt Institute to the students that are studying facilities management or project management, depending on which course is currently running. And one of the things that really struck me after giving a presentation on how to build stronger relationships, but then how to understand your clients and how to kind of figure out like what really matters to them. One of the students raised her hand and she said, "I've got a question, and it might be a silly question." She said, "I know we've spoken a lot about clients and learning about them and how it informs our design," because they were design students taking a project management class. But how do I develop a relationship with the employees, like my teammates, where I'm interning? She said, "I go there and they're at work and they just leave." She said, "I don't understand how to make friends at work." And I was like, wow, like I I wasn't expecting the question, but I think a lot of what we're talking about does have to do with like how do you just make friends at work or as an adult in adult life when it's very easy to grow up with friends and have friends from like your uni days and you've gone through things together, you've got similar shared experience, but when you're trying to develop friendships in the workplace as well, I think that's where trust comes into play. And she was struggling, she didn't even know where to start. All she knew was that she goes to this place, doesn't know how to have a conversation with her teammates where she's interning that is of any real substance. And then she leaves and she's like, I'm not connected to them professionally, and I actually have no friends there at all.
And I think that was one of the things that came out of the last workshop we did, where people, a couple of the participants were talking about how do I build those relationships internally and externally. And what I'm excited about is our module that we have on that now, and that we can literally help people navigate and figure that out. Because I do think it takes practice. It takes practice in figuring out what you're willing to share and what you're not willing to share, because you have to really have confidence in who you are. I mean, there are things that go on in my life that I will not share to the outside world. And there's a whole lot there that I'm willing to share. So where's that line? And it's going to be different for each of us. And then once you know what that line is, how do you build that bridge, and how do you care and show empathy and listen to and really feel like you've got a stake in other people's lives and other people's success and other people's just being human, that you're part of their world. And what a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think also what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like the need, it goes back to self-trust, but the need for boundaries and okay, perfect. Yeah. Because like boundaries in a romantic relationship helps to show the other person how you want to be loved, really, or how you don't want to be loved. And I think boundaries in a professional relationship help to really understand like how can we build trust professionally, and where is that limit for me as well, because it's okay to have boundaries, right?
It is great to have boundaries. And in fact, because I know we're going to need to wrap this up, what I would love to do next Tuesday is talk about how we deal with those unwritten rules of engagement, because that actually has the whole boundary thing set in. Like, how do we define them? How do we navigate them? How do we set them up? And what are real life examples of that? And maybe we talk about that next week, because I know we both have really good examples of what has worked and what has not worked and what the research says.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. This was a really great Trustworthy Tuesday chat. I'm happy that we're able to spend this time to get personal with all of our audience and everyone who is on the mission with us to build more trust in the world, one person at a time. So thank you for everyone for following and tuning in. Any parting words?
Yeah, we do have a Trustworthy Lab. They are offered monthly at no cost. And the next one is Tuesday. What time is it, Cristina? Because I know I'm on Buenos Aires. I'm on Argentina time right now.
So it's at 11 Eastern, which is 10 Central.
Perfect. So y'all, you can sign up on our page, and we'll put out the link as well with the show notes.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a